as Rob said in the video, it's incredible how many people we brought on board through this process. We started this from the bottom up. We didn't start this through an established organisation. And we built it up from small beginnings to something, I think, quite powerful, I think. And it's certainly reflected in the people who've been engaging with us certainly over the past year or more. So let me take you through the first book, which is the Make Massive Small Change. We don't need to make a case for small change. Okay, small change is happening out there. It's innate. Okay, it's happening on a daily basis where there's someone looking to use technology. Priya's here tonight on Changeify. Priya's here tonight on Changeify. There's people looking at it from, whether it's from Shack Dwellers International or people from Self-Made City, people on Handmade Urbanism. There's a vast number of projects out there. So we don't need to make the case for this in some ways. The real challenge we have all the time is how do we scale up this activity? A lot of it starts with incredibly good intentions, but the energy that goes into it is almost not warranted by the outcomes. Okay, purely because things are stifled, as I said in the video. And what we're looking to do at the end of this project is effectively to tell government what they can do, what behaviours they can institute to allow some of this stuff to happen a lot easier, to take that energy and scale up that energy. Because we come at a time when there's a lot of change out there. And there's a lot of change that's been reflected in this particular image, which is something happening in the system and something happening outside the system. And that's a worldwide phenomenon. And as we move forward, certainly I experienced recently, I know working with Darshana in Southall in West London, where there was 10,000 illegal beds in sheds or beds in backyards, we started to see this emergence of an informal economy in most parts of the world. And the challenge is, how do we take that energy and how do we scale it up? Let's look at the figures. A lot of you might have seen this image before, but we kind of lost the battle. And I think Rob and I were working out that we lost this battle back in the 1970s. And we won't win this battle if we use the thinking that we use today. Okay? So the challenge we've got is how do we find new thinking to address this challenge of rapid urbanization. At the same time, we see government effectiveness crossing that line. We lost the battle for a number of reasons. Okay, firstly, it happened a long time ago, and we're not hitting those numbers. We're not hitting those numbers in terms of the promises anyway. Secondly, governments don't want to intervene. Governments increasingly are stepping back and saying, it's too big for us to address. And for us, the whole question is, how do we change it? And the real issue is, governments find it difficult to change as well. So we've got to go to them and say, look, this is something worth trying. This is something that has an opportunity that's worth sharing, worth using. And that's what the whole Massive Small Change project is all about, is how do we take collecting that knowledge from all those small change projects, and how do we tell government that if they behave differently, they'll be able to release this energy. So we worked on these 4 things, and let me talk about the first one, which is the book of 12 stories. We could have written a rant. I'm quite good at writing rants. I've written one already. Okay, so there's a rant. Pick up a copy. There's lots of free copies around. Okay, take it with you. But we thought we'd write it through the eyes of 12 fictional people, okay, worldwide. And they're all people facing the challenges of the system, whether they're operating in an informal economy or formal economy. And you'll see examples of people operating in London, people operating in Caracas, people operating in Mumbai. And each of them are telling their stories in this book. And they're effectively telling us about the obstacles they face when they try and implement change, what they had to go through. And if you really look at most of the small change projects, they're really about the energy, quite often, of strong individuals who've been able to drive these projects forward. And that's unfair in some ways, because the majority of these projects fizzle and die. And the real challenge is, how do we change it? And we've got 5 people here tonight who are going to tell us very briefly about projects they've been working on. I'm going to ask them to say a couple of words a little bit later. But effectively, people who've had to deal with the system. I've certainly had to deal with the system recently on a community right to build scheme, where you realize that with all the best intentions, you can't deliver these projects. The system doesn't allow you to deliver these projects. So let me take you through this particular set of stories. So there's 12 stories from different parts of the world. Okay, people from Detroit, people from Caracas, people from Cape Town, Datong in China, Mumbai, etc. And 3 case studies in the UK as well, because there's so many fantastic case studies we can look at here of where we've done things wrong. The first project is, the first case study is Hector. There's an informal settler in Caracas. And most of these people are fictional characters, but they're set in real-life situations. So all these stories we've heard we've heard from others, and we collected these stories together to try and tell a story about how people overcame some of the difficulties. So this is what he faced. He faced a project which was to stick up tall mast lighting in his informal settlement, because someone wrote a project called Spotlight on Crime. And you can imagine it being written by an engineering company in combination with a university. There must be so many of these reports out there at the moment. What he really wanted was this. He wanted to shine a light on a book. Okay? So the question was, the story is, how does he take this project from an infrastructure project to a social capital project? Okay, so that's what his story is all about. Second story is about Julian in Katowice in Poland. He inherits 6 city blocks from his father. He's a rich bugger. Okay? He wants to do something different. He wants to take these 6 city blocks. He just wants to make things happen. But the planning system stifles him. The planning system doesn't allow it to happen. The way in which funding works doesn't allow it to happen. He can't create this project that he wants to call Emergence, which is his project where he just wants to try something different. He gets his inspiration from Make City in Berlin, and he learns that in Berlin they're doing things differently. There's a complete different attitude about how you deal with urban change in Berlin. So he learns from this, and effectively he starts taking inspiration from some of these things. He realizes that reductionism is the thing that's killing his project. Okay? It's a crime against urbanity, as he calls it. And what he's looking for is this idea of, let's go and try something, let's go do something different. Okay? So he just wants to try something different. He wants to do what we used to do historically, but he's stifled by the system. And the story is how he overcomes that to do something different in Katowice. Bree in West Baltimore, this is where The Wire is set. Okay? She hears about a story about someone in, I think it was in Birmingham, which is, they used to serve ASBOs on kids, and someone said, let's try something different. Let's tell the little old lady who gets the ball kicked against her door every day to walk out with a tray of tea and some biscuits and give it to those kids. And she just changes the whole social dynamics because of that. So Bree's thing is, she wants to change the attitude of the dealers, so give a cappuccino to a dealer. That's the way she interprets this ASBO. So she's learning from somewhere else, and she's trying to translate this into her place. And her place is complex. Her place is a whole set of social issues over here. Okay, they're places that have gone through fairly cataclysmic change over the years. There are a massive number of social problems, and effectively she has to deal with it. And effectively she's looking at putting democracy back into urbanism. So her story is, how does she start from the bottom up? Where there's a mayor at the time who just wants to flog off the waterfront, probably seen The Wire, flog off the waterfront to the developers. She wants to change the whole game plan in West Baltimore. And she becomes the radical incrementalist that starts changing things. Mahmoud is in Paris. He is in charge of an area called La Courneuve, which is one of the banlieues, where there's massive social problems in Paris. And his attitude is, never will our people be held to ransom by a single vision. Because what they've done is classically what we were part of, which is the Aylesbury Estate in London, which is a single vision master plan to change the place. So what he does is he ceremoniously shreds the master plan, which is done by a top international urban design consultancy, and you can probably guess who it is, who's got 5 major star architects working on their team, one of which specializes in tall buildings. Okay? And effectively he comes along, and what he does is he shreds the master plan ceremoniously, and he puts it into a glass box. Okay, that's his symbol that will never be held to ransom by the single vision. And what he does is he realizes that they're blowing up these buildings, we need to think about things differently, and he starts looking at what other places are doing. And he takes a clue once again from Berlin. Self-made city, Christian Ring's work. And his attitude is that all the time is think opposite, look to the other side of the lens, see what we can come up with from the other side of the lens. And he comes up with a different strategy about how we might look about social change in this particular area, which is enormously fraught with social problems. Cecilia is our housing minister. Okay, she's in Jeremy Corbyn's government. Okay, all right. All the men before her have lasted for only 6 months. They've all failed. They've all moved the deck chairs on the Titanic. They've all reorganized and come up with new initiatives. And she realizes that housing is a problem not to be solved. It's a potential to be realized. So she just takes a completely different attitude to what her think tanks are saying about housing. And that's the single challenge we face, not here, but in most parts of the world, is our attitude and our approach to housing, which we see as a real estate problem. Even in New York recently, they announced that they're going to the 25% social housing component with the developers. realizing we failed doing it here. New York are doing it now. I can't understand what they're doing. So she looks at something different. So she started looking. I could talk about this for ages. Okay, this is a rant. Okay, so I'll stop. Let's look at the next guy. This is Zhu Hao. He's the executive mayor in Dengzhou. They call what he enabled the new cultural evolution. And this is based on a real story of a film made called The Chinese Mayor, which is a guy who demolished the entire city centre of Datong to try and turn it into a cultural capital. And he kind of rebuilt all these new buildings, and he displaced about 500,000 people. And he got fired or relocated, as they said later. And the new guy takes over, and effectively, what does he do? How does he look at the whole question of what culture means in a place like this? And he learns from Dan. Where's Dan? He learns from Dan. Dan's done cultural master planning, where culture is about a bottom-up thing. Culture doesn't come from a top-down vision of a place. It comes from how you generate this thing from the lowest possible level. And he takes inspiration from the fact that civilization rests on the fact that most people do the right thing most of the time, as Lewis Mumford told us. So this is his story about how he changes Dengzhou, which is his town, from a mega-structural solution to something which is much more about an evolutionary process to cultural development. The town planner, who comes from West London, okay, I'll say it's Ealing, okay, because classically Ealing is the best West London borough. It's got 10,000 beds and sheds, but she's inspired by this fact about professionalism, okay. So she reckons that they're the only profession, the planning profession, the only planning profession, the only profession in the world that's got accountability without responsibility. She reckons that we should be bonded by a code of ethics, okay. So the idea of the Hippocratic Oath comes forward, and she starts standing on a platform that says we need to act like junior doctors, we need to change something, and we need to move from our command and control attitude to planning to managing in the present. In other words, continuous feedback loops. So we need to change our ways. We, the planning profession, are part of the problem. So this is her story about how she wants to change the planning profession into something that really is about making a much better world. Daniel is the housing architect. Okay, he financed his own housing prototype. He thought he had the perfect housing solution. Okay, like most architects think they have. At least now it's a home for his mother. Okay, so he financed the prototype. It didn't go anywhere. It's like most prototypes, it never gets beyond the first idea. He's been working in Nairobi on a whole set of different projects, and he realizes that he has to change his approach to housing. As there's increasingly less money, he has to take the clue from what's the biggest impact he can undertake with the lightest touch, and how can he introduce this concept of scalability. This is Julia. Julia's here tonight. Julia? Well, one of your images about scalability, which I love, this idea of the kucha to the puka, I think, isn't it? Okay. Civil engineer. The whole is greater than the sum of the pipes. Okay, this is an engineer for years who was putting pipes into the ground and realized that he was just wasting his time. And he also heard about Julia's project. This is your project as well, Julia. I think it shows your timeline on the side over there. Okay, so he thinks that he can use drainage as a way of building social capital. How can he change the game plan? And how does he lever out social change through this particular project? So he gets permission from his superiors to work on this project and take a completely different pitch on how he delivers this project. And he has incredible outcomes. He delivers the project at half the cost. They take the balance of the money and put it into a local school, because he actually works with the community from day one to deliver this project. That's his idea. Small change, lots of actions. He recognizes that in people is this resistance anyway. There's always growth of change. Doesn't matter how big the system is, you'll find that idea of life sitting there from the bottom up. This is my smart thinker, Giuseppe. Giuseppe's here tonight. So I've named all these people after our volunteers, by the way. Okay, so they all are. Giuseppe's here. I saw him walk in. Where is he? There's Giuseppe at the back. Okay, he's also Italian. Okay, data ontology and technology should augment human intelligence, not seek to replace it. This is something that Dave Snowden said about this whole question of smart cities and smartness, which is such an abstract thing, which is confusing all of us at the moment. And effectively what he's saying is, how do we move from this idea of a tech-led solution to how do we use technology to liberate the power of smart citizens? So he takes inspiration from this idea that smart citizens make smart cities. It's not smart cities. Smart cities make dumb citizens most of the time. And how do you put this idea of carbon and silicon together, the human with technology, and how do you liberate the systems with these two things, rather than seeing this thing as a top-down system all the time. And then the last one, I think, my second last one, sorry. This is the Settlements Director in Cape Town. This is something that's quite close to me, where the idea is that the government has promised that everyone would have a house, and Katerina is given the job of coming up with a new way of looking at projects. And she comes up with a way which she recognizes that she has to create order. The real problem in Africa is that a lot of the informal settlements don't scale up. They start informally and they stay informally, which is completely different to South America, where they tend to sort of become real pieces of town within 20 or 30 years, which is what John Turner told us years ago. Africa has a different set of problems. And the real question is, what is the nature of urban order that you need to put in place? So she recognizes that she has to put in place a structure of choice that gives infinite possibilities. She recognizes that she can't solve all the housing problems, but she can create the preconditions for these places to transition over time. And then the final one is Andrew, okay, who's an educator. And he takes inspiration from, he's an old principal of a school, and he recognized that education is, formal education is not solving the problems of Easterhouse, which is the area he lives in Glasgow. And he recognizes that everyone sees the solution as bright, shiny buildings, rather than really building building on the collective wisdom of people who live in the area. So he learns about scale-free schools that Indy Johar has been working on, and he takes the concept of scale-free schools and puts it together with community asset mapping, and he recognizes that he can build a school in the town without putting any infrastructure in, and he'll get a far better product. So that's his story. So all of them get together, and all of them realize that it isn't a question of the system being broken, and the system, we have to fix the system. It was built this way, okay, and we built it this way. We built the system that's working against us achieving some of our outcomes. So they all get together and they ask Andrew, my son Andrew, to write the declaration. That's what he did. And this is the declaration that was written. So the idea is that people collectively have come forward with an idea, a collective way of expressing their concerns. And that's what this whole project's all about. It's effectively, how do we start from those small beginnings, and how do we scale up those small beginnings into things that make an incredibly big difference? So we're going to ask you to pledge now, okay? Not now. You can pledge now if you want. A lot of you, thank you very much, have pledged already. Okay, we're doing quite well considering we only launched lunchtime today. But we want to try and scale this up. Okay, we want to take this to a different plane. And this isn't a question of money, because we set the pledges quite low. It's a question of getting names against it. We've already got names against our declaration. If I had to choose 30 people in the world I respect more than anyone else, all 30 of those people are signed up to that declaration. Okay? People like John Turner, who taught me years ago, or John Habraken, Chris Alexander, Tony Griffin, name them, Jason Roberts. You can't think of better people out there who've endorsed this. And the idea is, how do we scale this up to the next level? We put the declaration out to a large number of people to sign up, and effectively, we're getting signed up on a daily basis. So you've got to help us. Okay, this is not about me anymore or our team anymore. This is about all of us trying to take this out there. Because I actually really believe this is good for our profession. Okay, it's not good for us, okay, because it's incredibly stressful what we've been doing. It's about what's good for all of us and how do we take it out. And we're willing to go on board this adventure with you if you can help us. Thank you very much. Now, just